School counselors, nurses, what is the most embarrassing or WTF reason a kid has ended up in your office? A guy in one of my high school chem classes tried sneaking some sodium, if I remember right, out of the classroom. He unfortunately decided he would hide it in a paper towel in his crotch. He eventually sweated enough to activate it and ended up burning his crotch pretty badly. School had to call an ambulance. Next story. I have one involving both counselors and nurses. I have very well documented allergies to things like peanuts and pet dander and dust mites and fabric softener and anything that flowers, so basically I am always having some kind of allergic reaction. My school had a zero tolerance policy, so I had to go to the nurse and ask politely for my allergy medication on the relatively frequent occasions I would break out in painful hives. After realizing I was doing this, the school counselor started intercepting me to interrogate me about why I was trying to get out of class, what was really bothering me, and if I had found some clever new way to get high. The phrase, "No, really, look at these nasty hives all over my arms," meant nothing to her. She eventually called my allergist to ask him, hypothetically, if it was possible for me to have reactions this frequently, then called my parents and suggested they consider taking me to a psychologist because it might be psychosomatic. It wasn't. My immune system is just crap. Next story. I'll throw myself in here. Not a nurse, but the embarrassing kid. I grew up with a dairy allergy, not lactose intolerance, like an actual allergy where I was told that my throat would close and eyes swell up, or it did a couple times when I was much younger. Was pretty vigilant about not eating dairy, so I don't have an actual memory of a reaction. Well, second day of my freshman year, I bought a sub and checked it for cheese. Ate half of it before I realized there was white Swiss on it. I freaked out, went to the office and told them. They called an ambulance and my parents rushed there. And it turns out I've definitely outgrown the allergy. 10 years later, and my friends still harass me about the time I got scared by a sandwich and called 911. I'm still embarrassed about it every time they bring it up. Next story. When I was in grade 9, we were reenacting battles from wars with marshmallow ammunition in the schoolyard, and somebody whipped a marshmallow right into my open eye. This sounds like the wimpiest injury ever, and it really was, but it hurt, and I couldn't open my eye or see. I had to go to the nurse and explain that the black eye I was getting was from my marshmallow, and she had to do like an eye rinse to get out all the powdery sugar. She even called my mom, and they just laughed at me. Next story. I had a friend who got himself pretty deep with scissors. He proceeded to try to see how many pieces of a .7 lead he could stick into his body. He got about halfway through one piece when it broke inside him and he had excruciating pain, which he described as a burning and stinging. We were only in middle school and he went to the school nurse who tried to squeeze it out of him and then just assumed it had entered the bloodstream and left him alone. Next story. My mom is a school nurse. One day after the school day ended, she was about to leave when someone came to get her about an emergency. The student needed something from his locker in a sports locker room. The door was locked. He decided he would crawl into the ceiling, over the door, over the locker room, drop down from the ceiling and get what he needed, and crawl back out through the ceiling. The kid fell through the ceiling before he could make it inside the locker room. Next story. Not entirely the same thing, but in my freshman gen chem lab, someone managed to stick a glass funnel all the way through their hand. He had been trying to fit a hose around it and accidentally stabbed himself with it. It didn't help that his was somewhat chipped at the end, making it sharper. They ended up having to call an ambulance. It was rather gory. Lab was canceled though. I guess one man's misery is another man's fortune. Next story. Middle school counselor here. Not really WTF, but a 7th grader came to see me in tears because she thought she might be pregnant. After some discussion, I realized that she had given a HJ and thought she could get pregnant from getting the male fluids on her hands. Next story. In my freshman biology in high school, there were 2 kids who were throwing sharp dissecting objects at the ceiling, while the teacher was out of the classroom to get them lodged in the ceiling like people do with pencils sometimes during our frog dissections, and one of the kids accidentally stabbed the other one with a scalpel in his shoulder. The kid who got stabbed got super angry, punched the other kid, and both ended up going to the nurse. I thought that was pretty worthy of a WTF. Next story. Our art room was directly above the shop room, both on an exterior corner of the school. For some reason, the shop exhaust tube was turned upside down one day, making it vent directly into the art room's intake. The counselors were perplexed when they had a room full of sick and loopy students. They accused us of all getting high, and we were all sent back to the art room until even the teacher presented with the same symptoms. I think all we did was sit outside for a bit, then we all continued on with our day in other classrooms. Next story. I once got sent to the principal's in 5th grade because I went to the nurse after hurting my knee in gym. But the teachers thought that I was there to cheer on a friend who had gotten into a fight that I didn't even know had happened. Turns out my principal thought that she knew everything about every individual kid because she took a class about child development. The same principal also accused me of insubordination because I was wearing the same coat as the offender, found out it wasn't me, and still gave me detention. Next story. I once got one of those rubber earbud pieces stuck in my ear in high school. I tried fishing it out with my fingers, a pencil, etc., but it was lodged pretty tight. So I finally said F it and went to the nurse. Since she knew that I was going to music school for college and pursuing music, she didn't want to touch it because if something went wrong, she didn't want to be responsible for damaging my hearing. So she gave me the name of an ENT doctor and called my mother to come pick me up. The ENT doctor went in with tweezers, plucked it right out. Kind of a waste of time, but I got to miss most of a day of classes for it, so it was kind of all good in the end. Next story. When I was in 1st grade, my parents bought me some ridiculous costume jewelry, and I decided to wear a flimsy metal ring, comparable to what you'd get from a gumball machine, to school. For some dumb reason, I decided to stick my entire finger in my mouth and bite down on the ring while it was on my finger. It would bend from my biting it, and I thought it was cool and interesting. When I finally realized that this might have been a foolish thing to do, I had bit down on the ring so much that I couldn't get it off. We had a substitute that day that seemed really mean, so I was afraid to say anything to her, so I kept biting down on it, hoping that I could somehow bend it back to its original state and I'd be able to get it off. Wrong. I ended up biting down on it so much that it crimped down on my finger. I still didn't want to say anything to the teacher for worry of getting in trouble, so I just kept messing with it and making it so much worse. After about 15 minutes and developing a cold, purple, dying finger, I finally freaked the heck out and I burst into tears. The teacher was surprisingly nice about my little problem and just sent me to the nurse. The school nurse dunked my hand in ice water and then would try to yank it off. It didn't work, but I think the ice water bath kept me from losing my finger forever. And after a half hour, she called my mother. My mom was, or is, not one who's great in a crisis and freaked out as much as the 6-year-old me did. So she called my dad while he was at work. She drove me there. He cut the ring off with some bolt cutters or nipping pliers, something, in about 3 seconds. I cried because I felt so dumb, and he felt bad that I felt bad. So he got me an ice cream cone from Thrifty's and got to skip out on school for the rest of the day. You can cure all childhood troubles with ice cream. Come to think of it, you can kind of cure all adult troubles with ice cream too. Next story. My son's middle school had a really skittish nurse. I'm not sure what her qualifications were, but she called for an ambulance about twice a week. My son is asthmatic and had a complicated regimen back then. This woman just couldn't handle it for some reason, so we had to have my son take his meds right before and right after school, and he had to smuggle in his inhaler. But he never got flack for that until the end of his 2nd year there. One day he hit his head in shop class. Not bad, but they sent him to the nurse. She calls me at work and says I have to pick him up. I told her to call my wife, who worked from home and was only 5 minutes away. She couldn't process that and said, "No, I have to pick him up." I said that was silly. I'm at least an hour plus away and my wife is his primary contact 5 minutes from there. She said she didn't answer the phone. I sent an IM to my wife. She said she hadn't gotten any call, so she called the school. The nurse then insists that if I am anything of a responsible father, I was to be there in 10 minutes or she is sending my son to the hospital. I'm sorry, what? I am an hour away. My wife can be there in 5 minutes. So my wife finally gets through and the nurse speaks to her. I forgot what led to this, but my wife ends up in a fight with the nurse who refuses to tell her about why her son was being sent to a hospital. So my wife says she'll be there in 5 minutes to sort it all out. The nurse considers this a threat to her life and then calls the cops. So my wife is met at the school nurse office by the police. and EMTs because the nurse called an ambulance. During this, an EMT calls me because the nurse is dealing with my wife and the cops. He says, "My son is fine, just a little freaked out because some woman claiming to be my ex-wife or something is being accused of threatening bodily harm to the nurse." In the end, no one was arrested, and my wife sent my son back to class just fine. My wife said the nurse was so crazy, the cops pretty much took my wife's side right away. But she was no longer allowed on school grounds because the vice principal was also crazy and now terrified of my wife. The next time my son was in the nurse's office, he was caught with his prescribed inhaler. I had to come pick it up right away because it was unauthorized potential explosive contaminant. I got the call walking my dog, and the school was 5 minutes away, so I just went right over. Oh man, the second that nurse saw me, she flipped the F out, said I had a dirty dog and some kid allergic to dogs could die, and wow, she wouldn't even get near me. Had an office aide hand me the inhaler. Dude, that woman was crazy. Next story. One winter in junior high, my classmates engaged in running across a frozen pond for kicks and giggles. One of them decided he would run across barefoot, and, suckily for him, the ice decided to break under his bare soles. Needless to say, there were cuts and blood all over, and since our school's nurse was on lunch break, our math teacher had to carry him to a nearby school where they could tend to him. Next story. When I was in second grade, a boy held a pencil point up on my chair, and I sat on it. It traveled through my jeans and my underwear without any damage and stuck firmly in my little butt cheek. On this day, we happened to have a substitute teacher, and when I started crying, she took me into the in-classroom restroom, looked at my butt, informed me that the tip of the pencil was stuck in there, and then I just took off running and crying down the hall. I turned a corner, and the janitor, Ralph, called out, "Do you have a pause?" To which I replied, "There's a pencil stuck in my butt!" Then I continued down the hall to the nurse's office. The school nurse, Sherry, was a very sweet lady. She calmed me down, called my mom to ask for permission to touch my butt, and gently plucked it out. And I got to go home for the day. I consider it a win in the end. Next story. I got sent to the principal's one time because my friend apparently tried calling Pizza Hut, but instead called the superintendent by accident and asked for the family deal. When the man on the other end of the line asked who it was, he replied with my name. Edit. Because everyone keeps complaining it didn't happen, which it would seem like because I didn't explain it very well. To clarify, he called the number for Pizza Hut. The guy on the other end hung up because my friend was laughing and couldn't execute the prank. Then my stupid idiot friend decided to hit *69, thinking that it would call the last person that the phone called, which is wrong because it calls the last person that called, which happened to be the superintendent. Next story. In my high school Gen Chem lab, we had about 10 students, one of which got his finger stuck in a wooden test tube rack. He hid that hand behind his back for a good amount of time before our lab teacher noticed and asked why he was doing that. He ended up having to have the jewelry teacher in the classroom next door saw it off. Next story. Well, I feel like this fits here somewhat, so I will throw it in. I took a lot of art classes in high school, but so did a lot of a-holes who just wanted an easy A. One such a-hole sat across from me, was well known for being a troublemaker, and decided one day it would be cool to throw an X-Acto knife at me. It stuck in my leg. There was only one nurse for 3 schools in the district. Needless to say, I had to deal with it myself. Next story. One time in 6th grade, I was playing with scissors in my art class, and I cut my bottom lip. I put my hand to my lip instantly out of fear, and it was covered with blood. I walked up to the teacher, who was in the process of scolding some kid for doing something stupid with the art supplies. When he turned to me, he was so frustrated, and he said, "You better be bleeding." I showed him my lip. He shook his head and said, "Go to the nurse." I still have a little U-shaped scar on my bottom lip from that incident. Next story. I was sent to detention, which inevitably also meant seeing the counselor for misbehaving in grade 7. My crime? I didn't stand up when I was told to. I was in a wheelchair. The counselor thought I was lying when I got to his office when I told him what happened, so he kept me on detention. I got home, told my mom. She lawyered up and had him write a letter that scared the crap out of the principal so much I never saw that teacher or the counselor ever again. Next story. I don't fully remember the context, but one of the kids in my 10th grade science class was pretending like he was going to sit on a glass test tube. He kept holding it under him and crouching down like he was going to sit on it, and then he wouldn't. It was part of some joke he was telling with his friends while we were waiting for homeroom to get started. Our homeroom was held in the science lab. Well, eventually he slipped, landed on the test tube with his butt cheek, broke the test tube, and got glass all up in his butt. And since we had no school nurse, the principal had to confirm the injury and call his parents and an ambulance so he would go get stitches. He got to stand in class for like a week after that, and he also got a couple of days off. Next story. Kinda late to the party, but I'll throw mine in here. We were supposed to be reading Lord of the Flies in English class, but since I'd already read it, I opted to read my own book that I'd brought from home, Dracula. My teacher told me I needed to read Lord of the Flies, and I explained I'd already read it. She told me to read it again. This went back and forth until I finally challenged her to put any test she had on the book in front of me and I'd ace it. She kicked me out of class with a detention slip. The teacher in charge of detention was really confused how I got kicked out of English class for reading. Man, I read Lord of the Flies when I was way too young. It kind of scared the crap out of me. Those kids got real violent.